Ukraine. Do you see legitimate progress? I mean, you've got Ukraine saying that it won't give up any of its land, Russia saying a deal won't be made unless it does have some land. It's all a bit of a mess still, to be honest. Is a peace deal likely in your view? How are you viewing it at the moment?
No. I think you and I can't remember if you and I talked about this last week or if I talked about it with Laura 2 weeks ago, that one of the things I'd be looking for is how quickly the next meeting would take place. Remember, Trump met on a Friday in Alaska with Vladimir Putin, and then met either on a Monday or Tuesday in Washington, D.C. with many of the European leaders. Things were moving very, very quickly. They've now stopped. The Russians show no interest in meeting with Zelensky. Apparently, Zelensky says he wants to meet with the Russians, but under terms that I don't think are going to be acceptable to anybody. So things seem to have ground to a halt, and I think that's a really, really bad sign for the prospects for peace. I think Trump believed when he left Alaska that Putin wanted a deal. I think every passing day probably points out to the President of the United States that the President of Russia does not want a deal. And until you get someone in Russia who wants a deal and someone in Ukraine who wants a deal, then the war is going to continue, because right now we're not at the point where I think a ceasefire or peace talks are going to begin anytime soon.
Mick, what next then? You know, what more could possibly be done if neither side will budge at all? What is the solution here?
Yeah, that's a great question, Holly. Someone has to break the stasis. They have to change the status quo. What does that mean? That might mean dramatically more economic sanctions by the United States, an increase in military aid or the use of the military aid the Ukrainians are already getting, thinking about the permissions to use to go deeper into Russia and so forth. Something to change the current status, because as the way things stand right now, you're not going to get peace. Something has to change. And I think the only way that Donald Trump can change the calculus right now is either economically or militarily.
Joining me now, a huge week in American politics, is Steve Bannon's War Room co-host Natalie Winters. Great to see you, Natalie, as always. Now, Donald Trump is saying that Ukraine can't win the war without going on the offensive, saying nobody ever wins simply by playing defense. He's also channeling Richard Nixon and literally pointing the finger at Putin in the fairly aggressive manner that Richard Nixon did so. Now tell me, Natalie, are the MAGA Americans, the MAGA base, comfortable with this more aggressive posturing at Putin?
Well, look, I think at the end of the day, people voted for President Trump because they wanted what was going on in Ukraine to stop. And there are a lot of, I think, factors that contributed to that. First and foremost, it's how we've never had a meaningful audit of what exactly it is that we're funding, right? You're alluding to this idea that Ukraine should put forth a meaningful offensive. We don't even really know what that would look like. And if all of the money that we've sent over there and the aid and the ammo and the munitions, you know, to take your pick, if it's actually even ending up there, or if somehow it's ending up in other countries that we can't even track or trace. So I think there's sort of a lot of compounding factors why people are very upset with this. So when you start to see President Trump turning it on Putin, it's not necessarily that I think the MAGA base is upset about that because they defend Putin. It's just that's not necessarily moving, I think, in a peaceful direction, or at least de-escalating the situation, which is what I think people's primary concern is.
General, in the past couple of days, Russia has in fact poured cold water on this talk of peace. It said the peace talks would need to get a lot more preparation. Europe couldn't send any peacekeepers to Ukraine to guarantee its safety from another Russian attack. And in fact, now Russia and China would have to be involved in any such Ukrainian security, which suggests they can veto any protection if Russia does invade again. All this tells me Donald Trump is being played again.
No, I don't think so at all. I think he knows very well what Putin is up to. And we have been working very hard here for the last couple of days to put together some security guarantees. It's being led by the chairman of Joint Chiefs and the Supreme Allied Commander NATO, who happens to be an American general. And they've been working with the coalition of the willing. The details of that are all putting together. They're going to bring those Secretary Rubio will see some of that tomorrow. He's going to be talking to all the national security advisors from the participating countries, and the president likely will get a briefing on that on Friday. These security guarantees cannot be underestimated. They're absolutely critical. So our audience understands we're talking about assuming we get a peace agreement. How do we make certain that that peace agreement lasts? Because Russia has always broken ceasefires. They've always broken the agreements they did with previous agreements in Ukraine. They broke all the ceasefires in Syria. We know that they would break it. So we have to put deterrence there, some of it on the ground, some air power, etc., to make certain that Russia sees that and knows that they would be in a much larger war if they attack, and be in a war with the United States and with other European countries. And we think we can achieve that kind of deterrence. The other thing is to build up significantly the military capability of Ukraine. We know full well that if we have a peace agreement, China, Iran, and North Korea will keep arming and supporting Russia. Make no mistake about it. But that's kind of what is taking place here. And I see that as a positive thing. And it gives Zelensky, once we get this package together, and I've been talking to his very senior people who are here, and most of them, but not all of them, have gone home. Some of them are still working on these security guarantees. That gives him more running room in terms of options to make deals with Putin in terms of land and territory. Because when he knows he's got a solid security guarantee that if Putin attacks, he's going to be at war with multiple nations, and that's something he can't handle. Look, he can't defeat Ukraine. He hasn't been able to do it. Since in the last year and a half, he's gained 1% of territory. He has right now 19% of Ukraine. That's all he has, and he's been at this now, for 42 months. He cannot take Ukraine if the United States and the Europeans and others continue to provide assistance. Not possible. We've done all the analysis on that. He can't even take this fortress belt inside Donetsk that he wants Zelensky to give to him, and that's why he wants him to give it to him, because he can't take it.